Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce a woman, a lady who is an example to all of us here of what can be achieved in the energy industry, Lady Barbara Judge, who wears many hats, amongst which she's a member of the UAE Advisory Board for the Development of Peaceful Energy, and she's also chairwoman of the Energy Institute at UCL in London, University College London, and she's going to talk to us a little bit about her journey in this sector. So, ladies and gentlemen, if I can have your attention, please, Lady Barbara Judge. Thank you very much.
I am going to walk around. Well, thank you very much. It's such an honor and a pleasure to be here. Actually, to see all the women in this room is a dream come true. Beautiful, brilliant, educated, professional women. You are my dream come true. But actually, you're my mother's dream come true. Because my mother, 50 years ago, thought that women should work. Not just because they were alone, not just because they were poor, but because they had a brain and they should use it. And they should use their brain to earn money, because money was independence. And they should be independent. Women should work to keep their brain engaged and to have their own independence. And my mother taught a course at New York University called World of Work for Women. And what did she teach these women in the 1950s, before almost anybody here was born? She taught them in America, I come from New York, to wear white gloves, write a CV or a resume, and answer the ads, the want ads, even though they said men wanted. Because she figured that if a smart woman went around to see a man, sixth or seventh or eighth man, finally he'd be so desperate to have somebody smart, he'd hire her, because he needed somebody smart. Now, my mother was considered to be so strange that she was on an American television program called To Tell the Truth. It was a quiz program. And the celebrities were on this side of the quiz program, like we just had a program, and the guest was here. And the guest was somebody with a very odd occupation. And there were all these celebrities trying to guess the occupation of my mother, who taught women to work, who didn't have to. That was so odd that the contestant after her, the guest, was a snake charmer, because they thought my mother was like a snake charmer, just like her. So what happened? Well, she had this little girl, it was me. And you know how it is, I'm sure you do, all little children are asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? Did it all happen to you? So I said, oh, when I was a little girl, I want to be an actress. And my mother said, we are not having any starving actresses in this family. If you want to act, you can act in front of the jury. Go be a lawyer. And she said, if you do become an actress, this is what will happen to you. You will spend all day auditioning for parts that you will not get. Because although I was a good little actress in my small community, in New York City you had to sing and dance and act, and I couldn't sing even in the shower. She said, you will spend all day auditioning for parts that you will never get. And then you'll have to work all night to get the money to pay the rent. Anyway, I mostly always did what my mother told me, and I went off to become a lawyer. And I did, and I worked very hard, and that's another story, and I got a good job. And 2 years later, when I was in my job as a lawyer, it was 1 o'clock in the morning, and I was writing a document, dictating a document, the way lawyers do very late at night. People all know that, right? So it's 1 o'clock in the morning, and sitting across the way from me, taking my dictation, is a beautiful girl, really beautiful. And I said to her, what are you doing taking my dictation at 2 o'clock in the morning? And she said, oh, I'm an actress. I spend all day auditioning for parts that I never get. So I have to work in the steno pool at night in order to pay the rent. And I thought, thank you, Mother. Thank you. Now flashback, okay, flashback to when I was in law school for a little bit. So my mother said to me, you have to do really well really, really well. Because if you don't have better grades than all the boys, you won't get a job. And in fact, she was right about that, because only about 15 years earlier, Sandra Day O'Connor, the American Supreme Court Justice, couldn't get a job out of law school, Stanford Law School. She had to be a legal secretary. So I did what my mother said. I told you when I listened to her, I mostly did it right. Unfortunately, I didn't always listen to her. But in this case, I did get very, very good grades. And so when it came to graduate from law school, it was a moment just like this, only many years ago. People, all the law firms were talking about having their first woman. They had panels about why it would be nice to have a woman working in the law firm. But it was just the beginning. So I went to my first interview with all my A's, many, very high grades. And I sat down in the interview chair, and a man in a very important law firm said to me, "You know, Barbara, you're very lucky." I said, "I am, why?" He said, "Because we all have to take one woman. We're being forced to. And with all your good grades, we think you can't do too much harm. But you don't want to really be a corporate lawyer like it says here in your application. That's for men." I said, "Okay, I'll be a litigator." That's what I did last summer. And they said, "Oh no, that's for tough men. What you want to be, sweetheart, is a family lawyer. So you can have time off to take care of your children." I thought, I don't even have a boyfriend, and he's talking about children? But of course you'll never be a partner, because that's for men. But we have spent the whole weekend thinking about how to make a woman happy in our firm. I said, "You have? What have you?" He said, "And we figured it out." I said, "What have you figured out?" He said, "Oh, we're going to put flowers on your desk every Monday morning." That should satisfy for not being a partner. So like my mother always said, I was very polite. I stood up, I shook the man's hand, and I said, "Thank you very much, but I don't think we're talking about the same job." Now, just so you know, it was a good moment, and I did get lots of job offers, because they all kept saying, "Oh, Barbara, you're so lucky. You have all these good grades. We all have to get one woman. We might as well have you. We think you can't do too much harm." And one of the last firms I went to said to me, again, "You're so lucky," same story. He said, "But you're going to have a terrible time, a really big time, difficult time." I said, "Why is that?" He said, "Because we all look alike. All the law firms look alike." And you know, they did all look alike. They were all men. They were all sort of white men wearing suspenders or braces with white shirts, and all the law firms looked alike as well. I said, "How shall I make this decision?" And the man said, "Oh, for you, this is what I think you should do. I think you should go home this weekend and put all your offers on the table and try to remember where you liked the curtains the best. And then you'll know if you fit in." So I couldn't go there either. So I went to another law firm where I was second. They already had a woman, and that was good because I didn't want to deal with the flowers on the desk thing. Okay, so I'm going to fast forward. I told you about the fact that at 2 o'clock in the morning, there's still that woman, poor woman, taking dictation from me. But I was getting along in the law firm reasonably well. And one day in the law firm, I was sitting at my desk. It was about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and I was about four years out of law school, and doing reasonably well, I thought. And a man came in to my office, the office manager. And he said, "Barbara, we're going to move your desk, your office, from this side of the building to that side of the building, over there." They were restructuring. There was nothing sinister in it. I knew that. The law firms were always moving people around. And I said, "Oh, I don't want to move over there. I'm not going." And they said, "Why?" I said, "Well, I'm cold. I'm always cold. And that's the cold side of the building. I have this little, I'm even cold here. I have this little heater next to my desk. That's the cold side of the building. I'm really not going to go there." And the man said, "Why?" I said, "Because I'm freezing." I said, "But of course," and I was joking, "of course, if you want to move me into a partner's office, then I'll be glad to move over there." Well, you know, the man walked out stunned from my office. And around the firm went this whisper, "Do you know that Barbara thinks she'd become a partner? Do you know that Barbara thinks she could be promoted? Do you think that Barbara, she thinks she could be a partner?" And he walks into my office the next day, same man, and he says, "Barbara, I have heard that you think you could be a partner in this firm? And I looked up at him, startled, and I said, well, of course. What do you think I'm doing? Working here for my health? And that was the first time in the law firm that anybody knew that I wanted to be promoted. They thought I was just happy having a nice job with a nice salary, and that I would be happy to do that for the rest of my career. So the lesson in that is, if you want to be promoted, you have to tell people. That's the lesson. Now, I was going to tell you a few other lessons. Do you want to keep hearing about this? Yeah. Okay, so this other lesson. Remember, I'm still in the law firm, and I'm working for a man who's really difficult, really impossible, actually. And he likes to work till 2 or 3 in the morning. That's why I was dictating to that pretty girl. It was very difficult. It's a long time ago, and they don't have computers like we have now. And I was a mergers and acquisitions lawyer. I did deals, and I'd write acquisition agreements. And he'd send them back to me and call them purchase and sale agreements. And that I shouldn't say the acquirer or the acquiree. It should be the purchaser and the seller. So next agreement would be purchase and sale agreement, purchaser and seller. Then he'd send it back to me, and he'd say, no, it's the buyer and the seller. One day I wrote a letter, a transmittal letter to my client that said, Dear John, I enclose our proposed draft of the acquisition agreement, which he sent back to me and said, I enclose our suggested drafted agreement. Now you tell me the difference between proposed and suggested. I don't know. So people said to me, why are you working for this man? He's so difficult. He's very powerful, but he was very difficult. And I said, well, it's because I think he's a good person. I think he has good ethics and morals. I just believe he must be a good person. And so I kept working for him, and he kept driving me crazy until 2 o'clock in the morning. Now remember I told you I was the second woman at that firm, remember? I said I didn't want to go deal with the flowers on the desk? Okay, so at some point along the way, that woman was made a partner. She was a lot older than I was, and they made her wait about 5 or 6 years from when she first could be considered. But she became a partner. And I was thrilled for her. Totally thrilled. I thought was really wonderful. But I also knew that I would have to leave, because they were never going to make a second woman partner in that firm. Now, my friend suggested that I stick around another year, because another year later I could actually be considered for being a partner. So I stuck around another year. And the partners meeting came up. And this is what I am told happened, because of course I wasn't there. Fred, remember my Fred, the impossible one who changed acquisition agreements to purchase and sale agreements and suggested to propose? Well, I told you, Fred was a very powerful lawyer. Anyway, I'm told that in the partners meeting, he got up in front of all the partners, and he stood at the podium, and he said, we do not need another woman partner in this firm. We have one, and that's enough. But we do need a good acquisitions and mergers lawyer, and we have Barbara, and we should make her a partner. And that's how I became a partner. Good old Fred. Now, let me tell you about Fred, who, by the way, I used to think was my only mentor that I'd ever had in my career. But actually, I was wrong. Because recently I learned the difference between a mentor and a sponsor. A mentor talks to you. A sponsor talks about you. And a sponsor is what Fred was, it turns out. And the implicit deal with the sponsor is that if you work really hard for me and show me how smart you are, then I'll look after you. That's the deal. The mentor is not your boss. He's kind of, or she's kind of telling you how to deal with your boss, how to deal with the problems, to give you good advice and support. And I have to say, Fred never gave me any advice or support. All he did was tell me what to do and how I did it wrong. Interestingly enough, a footnote is about 3 years ago, I went to New York and I gave a big speech for a lot of CEOs, and I invited Fred. He's old now and retired. And I put him right next to me because I thought he would be proud of me. And I gave my speech, and when it was over, I said to Fred, how did I do, Fred? He said, well, not bad, Barbara, but you know, you had 3 grammatical errors. Notwithstanding, Fred was a mentor, and that's the deal. You get those people. The implicit deal is you work hard for me, and I'll look after you. And you need more than one. I mean, I only had Fred, but you need more than one because he actually did, but sometimes they don't. Had another boss later who actually said, your job is to make me look good. Well, I did, but he didn't help me. He was gone by that time. So you need a few you need a few sponsors, and you need a few mentors. You need your own little private board of directors, your own little group of people who you can talk to and ask their advice before you make decisions. Now, I have lots of other stories about my very up and down career, but we have a short period of time. So I thought I'd tell you one more, if you'd like to hear it. One more story about the really biggest break I ever had in my life, but it's very defining about what we women should think about. Okay, so remember Fred actually helped me. I wonderfully did, became a partner in the law firm, remember that? So now here we are, I've just become a partner, and my husband and I decided to go on a vacation for the first time in our entire life, because lawyers never have vacations. And this is a long time ago, and China is just opening up. It's just opening up. It's just the end of the Cultural Revolution. Are you still with me? Well, let me tell you. So the Chinese government was collaborating with Pan Am to soak the American tourists. It was the first time that Americans could go to China if you weren't in the government. This is 1979, and they had this bus tour, a bus tour that you could pay to go on, to go around China. But you couldn't just pay your money. You had to be somebody. It was very hard to get it. You had to be qualified. You had to be chairman of a company, or the head of a law firm, the head of a business association, somebody important. And just two partners in law firms were just kind of the lowest of the low. We just sort of slipped on. But anyway, we went on this bus tour. And as I say, it was very expensive. In fact, we couldn't afford to buy an apartment and go on the bus tour. And my husband said, do you want to buy this apartment or do you want to go on this tour? And I said, oh, China will change. Let's go on the bus. Let's go and see the end of the Cultural Revolution. We can always buy an apartment. Don't ever follow my advice for real estate. That apartment last changed hands for $47 million US. And I'm on a bus tour, right? There I am on the bus tour. And on this bus tour, which is a crummy bus tour, everybody is a couple. Everybody's a couple sitting with their spouse or their partner, except one single lady. One. And not only that, she's a pain in the neck. She's one of those people that the glass is always half empty. This is communist China, remember? So she says the bathrooms aren't clean, there are holes in the towels, they don't have a hairdryer. I mean, come on, hairdryer? It's communist China. And nobody wants to talk to this lady. But me. I kind of put my arm around her and take care of her. And for some of you know, I'm a big foodie. I write restaurant reviews as a hobby, and so I'm trying to go off the bus tour all the time to find the street food, because that's what I'm interested in China. And I've got this lady with me complaining all the way. And my husband says, why are we taking care of this woman? She is such a pain in the neck. And I said, she's a woman alone. She's alone on a bus. It's hard to be alone. Could be my mother. Could be me. Excuse me. Could be me. We just have to take her. So hush, we're taking her with us. Okay, so the trip's over, and she does what any polite person would do. She invites me to lunch. She invites me to lunch in a nice restaurant in New York. And remember I told you that everybody on the tour was somebody? Remember I told you that? Well, it turns out that she was the most senior woman broker in Wall Street, most senior one. And I'm having lunch with her. And remember I also told you that if you want to get promoted, you have to ask people, you have to tell people you're looking for. I told you that, right? So I'm sitting and having lunch with her. And I say, you know, Paula, her name was Paula Hughes. I don't want to sound like a spoiled brat, but actually I've just become a partner in my law firm. But I want to do something else. I don't want to spend the rest of my life looking at the East River, which is where I lived in New York and where my apartment was and my job was. And she did what all of us would do. She said, okay. I said, so if you see something or have a good idea, could you remember me? And she says, sure, Barbara, send me your resume, your CV. So that's what I did. I slipped my CV in the thank you note that I sent her, and I forgot about it. Totally forgot about it. It's 6 months later, 9 months later, and I'm in California doing a deal, still doing acquisitions and mergers for Fred, and I'm in California negotiating, and the phone rings in a conference room. And the phone rings, and it's my partner in the law firm. And he says, Barbara, do you know, I've just had a call from the White House. And you are on the short list to be commissioner of the Securities and Exchange Commission. Now that's like God for lawyers, I promise you. So I say, Peter, I am closing the biggest deal of my life, and I have no time for these stupid jokes. And I crashed the phone down, and I went back to my deal. And the phone rings again, and it's Peter. And he says, Barbara, don't worry. We told the White House that you'd just become a partner, and you'd never leave us. So go back to your deal. And he crashes the phone down. So I call him back, and I say, Peter, you just tell the White House that I'll be there next Wednesday. Because the one thing you know for sure is deals never close on time. So Wednesday comes, right? And I go to Washington where I've never been, and I buy an ice cream cone at 11 o'clock in the morning because I love sweets. And I'm walking down the streets of Washington, and I think, maybe my life will change. Maybe. And I go to the interview in the White House, and there's a man sitting there, head of presidential personnel. And he says, the president wants to put a woman on the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission. But we've had some women in the government before, and mostly they were too political, and mostly they all failed. So this time we decided to do it like a headhunter. We want a woman who's a partner in a big firm that does securities law, acquisitions and mergers. But in all of the country, there are only 6, and we have found them all. This is 1980. I said, how could you find me? I am nobody. You have found them all. I am nobody. I am the youngest partner in Wall Street, the youngest woman, youngest partner. I work every night till 2 o'clock in the morning for a crazy man named Fred. I never go out. I have no friends. My husband had to call in the relatives for my 30th birthday because I didn't know anybody. How could you possibly know me? And the man said to me, oh, you were easy to find. You were the easiest of all. We just called the most senior woman broker in Wall Street, and she told us that she had your CV resume right on her desk. And her name was Paula Hughes. And that's how I got that job. That is how I got that job, which changed my life. I went to Washington. I became a commissioner of the SEC. I started the international division of the SEC. I went to Hong Kong. And I'm sitting here talking to you today in Doha in this very important conference, all because of that woman. So the lesson in this story is always be nice to single women. Especially on a bus. Thank you.